Hey everybody, Andy Cavernan here with another Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. This last weekend, we spoke in church from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 27 through 31, where God provides what is needed for those who are weary. And He provides in some pretty wonderful ways. We talked about His intervention, His interaction, and His inner action. That God sometimes miraculously intervenes, sometimes God more pedantically interacts and uses people to accomplish His purposes, and sometimes God simply does a quiet inner action in the soul and the heart of a person, regardless of what's going on around. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, who does God do this for? And a natural thought is, God does this for the obedient. God does this for those who are right with Him, that are acting according to His purpose. And that would make some sense to us. I read in 1 Kings chapter 17 of a man coming along the scene during a troubled time for the nation of Israel who is doing the work of the Lord. And his name is Elijah. And God calls Elijah to go to the people and tell them that rain is going to be withheld from the land because of their sin. And as he brings him out into this prophetic message, he calls them away into the desert by a brook. And God provides for him as he's doing his work. And in 1 Kings 17, verse 5, it says, "So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the brook Cherith that is east of the Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook." And so it makes sense to us that, of course, God's going to provide for somebody who's doing His work. And so as Elijah goes out, the ravens come and they bring, and we get it. God is intervening on the behalf of Elijah because Elijah is obedient to the Lord. A little later in chapter 17, we read of Elijah's encounter with a widow who, because of the drought, has nothing left. Her son and her have only a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil left. And Elijah comes along and says, "Hey, I need some food. Would you make me some bread?" And the widow says, "Well, we don't have anything left." And Elijah says, "Well, God is going to provide for you." And sure enough, He does. And in verse 15 of chapter 17, it says, "And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and her household ate," not just one day, but for many days. God provided as people were obedient to Him. Now, a man named Obadiah was doing the work of the Lord, and he had hidden away prophets. And the text again talks about food in chapter 18, verse 4, and it says, "Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water." Here, God's prophets are being fed with bread and water during a time in which they were being persecuted and hunted down by Ahab and Jezebel, who were just these notoriously evil leaders during the nation, this time in the nation of Israel's history. Then God provides again, and as Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal up on Mount Carmel, it says in chapter 18, verse 18, "Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering." This is the offering of Elijah, "and the wood and the stones and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the torch." Again, God provides miraculously for one who is following Him. Elijah is seeking the Lord. But then Jezebel threatens Elijah's life, and what does he do? For the first time, rather than following the direction of the Lord, Elijah simply turns tail and runs. He runs away from everybody. He assumes he's the only one left in Israel who's following after the Lord, and he becomes very, very despondent. And we think, well, okay, now he's done it. The Lord's going to check out on him, and Elijah's going to get something that he deserves because he's not following the Lord here. What does the Lord do? Well, I want you to look with me at 1 Kings 19, verses 6 through 8. It says, "And he looked," and this is Elijah, "and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again." God sent an angel to provide for Elijah, not when he was obedient, not only when he was obedient, but also when he was in need, when he was desperate, when he was at the end. God gave him enough food to simply get up and to eat and then to lie back down again and go to sleep. And the text goes on. It says, the angel said, "The journey is too great for you." He understood Elijah was at the end. And then Elijah arose and he ate and he drank. And he went in the strength of the food 40 days and 40 nights. Elijah pressed on into the wilderness with the strength that the Lord had provided. And friends, I just want to encourage you. There may be times in your life where you're walking very closely with the Lord, and you sense His pleasure, and you sense that it's a response by God to your obedience. And perhaps it is. Perhaps God is blessing you because of your obedience. He works that way sometimes. But sometimes you, me, maybe any one of us, feel the pressures of life and we're struggling, and all we can do is sort of turn tail and run. Keep your eyes open in that moment. Our God is a God who delights in extending His grace to those He loves. And sometimes you're not going to deserve it, but God's going to feed you anyway. He's done that for me. He's provided for me in opportune moments. And sometimes it's only going to be enough to help you to rise up and to eat and then go back to sleep. But as you simply allow yourself to be cared for by God, I'm confident you're going to experience the heart of God in your brokenness in ways that you otherwise simply wouldn't. And my challenge to you is to let God feed you. God delights in feeding you. Let Him restore you. And He'll give you the strength you need. For Elijah, it was another 40 days and 40 nights of wandering in the wilderness. But God's sustenance provided for him. He'll provide for you too if you let Him. Would you eat at the table of Jesus Christ? Would you feast in His Word? And would you allow Him to provide for you? Maybe just enough to get up and eat and go back to sleep again. Maybe enough for the next 40 days. Maybe enough for well beyond that. But let's keep trusting the Lord. Let's keep eating from His hand. That's the way He wants it. That's what glorifies Him. And frankly, that's what's best for us. Where else could we go but to a living God who loves us? God bless you.